On Mark. He's getting a cookie. I saw a deer on Chantilly, which made me think, is there gonna be a mountain? I saw an archery hunter. Which I was, don't shoot. Me."
Oh my God, on Chantilly?
No.
My French pass.
On Chantilly, sorry. Should've
I was like,
clarified.
what the heck?
No. He was confused for like. Oh.
Be wearing a target.
Was I? I'm like, just take me down.
Nikki JJ's emailed, she's almost here, so we can expect her.
Okay, cool. That's a relief. Mark, do you like your dais sign? Did you see?
No.
Is there one there?
No, we didn't realize you'd be up there. We can
Oh.
get you one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Where to go?
We'll get you one, Mark.
I already have.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
did we find
It's
it?
the-
Do you want me to find it? Okay.
it's so official.
Okay, I will call to, oh, it's 5:32. I will call to order the September 16th BOSAC meeting. Roll call Duke.
Matt Powers.
Here.
Kristen Joyce.
Here.
David Rossi.
Here.
Nikki LaRochelle.
Here.
Chris Tennell.
Here.
Bobby Zanka.
Here.
Jay Beckerman.
Present.
Should have said please. Roll call, please.
No problem.
So discussion or approval of our August 19th minutes. No edits from me.
I move they be approved.
Second.
Okay. Any additions to our agenda or concerns for tonight? Good there. Okay. So non-agenda items, any public comment? No. Okay. Great. Okay, staff summary.
Yeah, happy to discuss any of these further. You know, just trying to make it comprehensive and kind of quick blurbs on everything, but we can get into more detail. One thing I did want to plug before you ask for more detail on other things is the merge survey. So merge is, they're coming next week, but their survey for input on their wayfinding part of the process is closing on Sunday. So we're going to make one more push to try to get a bunch more participants, and we're going to do things like push it out in social media and put a blog post on our website and try to get an iPad at the rec center. But if this group could help promote it, that'd be appreciated.
Did the senior center ever send anything out? I never saw anything.
I've given them the materials to do so. I just don't know if they've gotten like email blast yet. Since, but that's things to remind me. You can address that tomorrow too. I'll follow up.
I've gotten email from at least one of the bigger hiking groups, and there's no mention of it in there.
Okay.
Is there a way to do like a QR code or anything at the rec center so they don't have to stay there to do it?
Yeah, we'll put the sign up, and that's what we have on the trailheads. And we'll put that similar or the same QR code up at the rec center along with an iPad. We just gotta.
And one other thing, if you guys tag like some of us on Instagram, we can reshare it through, it's like, cause I know there's not a ton of followers of that yet, but
We believe.
but we believe, and I would be happy to like re-promote it.
Right.
And just try and get it out to more people. So.
How many trailheads have the QR codes on them now? For this, I mean.
Between around 12 to 15. We haven't done mostly just in town still. But we debated this morning and did expanding that reach a little bit, including more mid-country stuff. So I need a whole lot of paper and stuff everywhere. Not that we wouldn't clean it up.
And is it paper or is it just a QR code on the sign?
It's a QR code that's laminated.
Okay, so there's no paper there for
No,
them to
no
draw.
paper.
And do we have a count for how many responses we've gotten so far? I know it said 100 in here, I think.
Yeah, we're not quite at 100. So yeah, we'd love to try to get one more push. And then it's in here, but merge will be coming to our next POSAC meeting and then the council meeting the following night, but we're also gonna have two public engagement meetings that they'll be hosting as well during their visit.
But it'll be too late for that to result in more survey responses if it closes this summer.
That's right. The survey deadline is Sunday.
And is that hard? I mean, is there a reason why it couldn't go on any further?
I think just because they're trying to incorporate the answers into, their concepts. If they keep fielding responses, then they're gonna keep changing their plan potentially.
There'll still be an opportunity for input when they're here, just not through that.
Further staff summary.
I have a question about the McCain parcel, always. There's three, so this went to council and then I'm just trying to get a better timeline. Is this going? Hold on, sorry, I'm trying to find.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the RFP for design consultant, is that is like BOSAC work, right? Or
It-
no? Or is that just staff work? I'm trying to figure out where we plug in here before BOSAC review, or is that the first time we plug in?
That was our thought, was that BOSAC could be part of the RFP and outlining the scope of work. It went to council because we have to get budget approval.
Right.
And make sure they're comfortable with the timeline as well, but thought we could engage with BOSAC to figure out scope of work, put out the RFP and then follow that flow chart.
Okay.
So you are actually gonna have BOSAC input at the beginning to just engage on the scope,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Does that work for you?
Is the consultant specifically for our track 8 or I don't know. I had a little sticker shock about $100,000 for a consultant for just our parcel and
Yeah, and as this reads, are we just talking about programming on the open space portion? Or are we talking about the entirety of what McCain represents, with the snow storage and parking? And are we taking some responsibility for the oversight of that and the development of that? Or are we just talking about the open space?
I think just the open space. I think the 100 grand is a placeholder and,
Okay.
we don't know exactly what it would cost, but I would estimate that's on the high end of the range.
okay.
Find someone who understood a specialty firm that understood the river, wetlands and how, the 5-year floodplain and how that'll interact. Cause I think most of the programming is going to happen on the east side of the river and not on the west side where we've kind of called it off limits. And so we really want to have a consultant in there that has a firm grasp on, what dynamics with the river overflowing on what a 5-year schedule or somewhere around there and what the impacts are.
Okay.
So is the consultant for track 8 or track 8 and track 10B?
I guess track 10B as well, Bobby. We just, this map in there, it doesn't have the current river alignment. It's more channeled in the map in the packet. Now it's more windy. So it's a little bit out of scale, but yes, the consultant will help us with the west side of the river too. But as Jay said, I think our intention there is to preserve the sensitive wildlife habitat and have that closed to public access.
But not track 15. The consultant doesn't have anything to do with that, which is called open space park/parking.
That would not be part of the scope.
And who's got the purview over track 15?
Currently, that's town manager, public works, and eventually council.
Hey.
Oh, one more thing on the dates. It's fine with me, but the February date is President's Day. We did with,
Does that not work?
well, I think it's a holiday for
Yeah.
a lot of people, so.
Right,
No, it works for
right.
me. I just wanted to make sure it works for
Yeah,
everybody else.
that's a good thought.
Yeah, thank you. I looked and it's not a Town of Breck staff holiday, so we'll be here. But if it doesn't work for everybody else, we can reschedule.
Be 50/50 on that, but always something that comes up with the kids.
So this looks like it has been moved from President's Day, right? Has been adjusted for President's Day and spring break. So the days that are proposed here are not, it's not President's Day, right?
No, it is.
I'm sorry, I get them confused. There's MLK Day and President's Day, and one was a staff holiday. I'll have to look, find it in the packet, but yeah, so we're not meeting on MLK Day, but I believe President's Day. That's the tentative schedule, if you guys.
President's Day, but a lot of these are not. So
February 17th.
It is the 17th, February 2025.
This president.
So
I just wasn't sure if the schools were closed. I'm not. It's fine with me.
So January 27th and April 28th are the third Monday or not the third Monday? Because it says those have been adjusted.
That's right.
so the fourth Mondays because of President's Day and spring break. And it up for discussion, but we could move the February one because of President's Day, but I didn't move it preemptively because it's not a staff holiday.
Want to move that one? Is that problem? It's maybe Matt isn't, it doesn't work for,
I mean, don't change it on my account, but
Is school out that day?
something's gonna happen.
I think school's out that day, but I
Then let's just
don't
not.
quote me on that. Is that problematic for anyone else? Okay,
Just keep it.
we'll just pray to the planning gods that Matt can come.
And we've got some time.
Not the new
things-
absence policy.
Or the Zoom policy.
Yeah.
Yes. And just to echo what Duke said, so Duke and staff are just making the staff summary list more robust to keep us more appraised of projects than I think historically, which I appreciate. So that's why the list is quite a bit longer than it has been.
We're not actually working any harder.
It's a lot of typing.
Credit.
Yeah.
My one last question on staff summary was, I believe the Excel folks were supposed to be in working and I haven't seen anybody and I was just curious if they
Are you talking about B&B or?
they're like exclamation and.
That's correct. I'm gonna call on Catherine. She's been bugging them, but yes, we want them to come in now and do you have an update to provide? Good.
Not getting anywhere with them on the agreement that is in their law court to edit and get back to us so that they have the permission to do the work. And last we heard from them, their goal was to start just after Labor Day, February.
President's Day.
You know, reaching out to them practically daily. Yeah, sorry, I don't have.
Oh, it's no, not your fault. I was just curious more than anything. Okay.
Was there any like anything outside of a we promised to do it that was,
We do have a bond with them,
okay?
as we do on most Excel projects. It doesn't really seem to impact their, I don't know. We have a $300,000.
And do you like put a time frame on it when it kicks in and you can say, hey, we're taking the money and we're doing the work ourselves?
Technically, yes, but my understanding is it's a pretty complicated process to actually like make that happen. But as long as the grading and permits are open, that bond is still an option. To eventually. Hopefully it won't come to that.
Hopefully it won't.
I'll send another email.
Try to get them to work. Yeah, I just looked, the winter break is February 24th to the 28th.
Perfect.
I have a question about this bioacoustics. Could you tell us a little more about that? That sounds pretty fascinating.
Yeah, Alex, please add on to anything I say, but the Hagen Family Foundation. They're the ones that are doing the documentary on the beavers. They have offered to provide us with these bioacoustics receivers. They're not speakers, they listen to the sounds. And the way they work is we kind of put them up like wildlife cameras, and they can just track the bird calls and then start to create a data set of which birds are coming through the gulch at which times. And we're working on also adding potentially bats to that because we don't have good info on that. So yeah, they approached us and we want to support it. And I think we would do the maintenance, but they would provide the startup costs. And it could give us, I know that we are also doing other avian monitoring, but this could give us like more data on which birds are in the gulch at which locations at which time. And it's
do they-
always on, you know.
They do the analysis?
Yeah, it's the way it works is there's like a software filter. So it's not a person actually looking or listening to them. It runs through the filter and that catalogs it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Great. We set on staff summary.
I just had a question about DNR kennels thing. Is that a new thing or is that something you guys had been talking about for a while? I guess sort of in similar Excel energy fashion, what is the opportunity that this is going to not be a temporary or longer than what some people might consider temporary installation? I mean, I know, I guess that's rhetorical. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
They're looking for another place currently that would be more permanent than this. This agreement is for, I believe, just eight months, I think. And that's been, because they're working with the county and town own this. County owns 25%, Breck owns the rest. So we've been in negotiation with them about where these tanks would go, how long they would be there. Originally, they wanted to do a 5-year with an automatic renewal for another 5. They're looking for a permanent place right now. 10-year, they have told us that 10 years from now, they do not believe that they would need this because of the innovative non-pipeline alternative plan. And until then, I think we're just hoping that this will just be one and done. However, they may come back and ask.
I am skeptical.
I'm shocked.
I mean, it's hard to tell from the renderings. Do you know, I'm sorry, this is going to your real life job. Do you know if these, I mean, the structures look sort of like fairly serious and semi-permanent.
The only thing that is, so they did flag out there. I think, Catherine, are the flags still out there? You can go out and look. The rendering here is actually pretty accurate where it is, but those tanks are very mobile. And then they would put a shed up for its 24/7 security out there. To, make sure nothing goes wrong. And then when they are out of, should they need to have these things activated, which I believe, Tony, you probably know a lot more about this than I do. I believe it's once we hit 19 below, then they start to trigger where the liquid natural gas comes from. It actually comes from very far away. They've got to have these ready to go to do the injection into the natural gas line. I don't know what happens from there. It's all magic.
That's okay. I mean,
but they are quite mobile. If you remember, they were out at the corner of Coin Valley and Highway 9 up until earlier this year when the town put in that road, so they had to move them.
I see.
So
I would just
their contention is it would be restored to, revegetated and restored. The place where those tanks are is where the old DNR kennel building was.
like that foundation.
Yeah.
Still there, right?
Yes, it's still there. That's where that screening, the foundation isn't really there, but it's sort of flattened out and there's a couple of little, concrete things. I don't think it has anything to do with actual placement other than they wanted to screen it from the highway as much as as much as possible. They never had to use it in the two, I think it was in there for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, we never got cold enough for it, but I think this is a risk they're not willing to take. We're making them go through the permitting process. We're not entirely there yet. We've been going back and forth quite a bit, so.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess that my only encouragement would be to get a more ironclad cleanup plan in place with timelines and things like that. I don't know how you have function in place to do that, or if they'd be willing to have.
Well,
that
it's
conversation.
also, given the lack of work they're doing on mitigating their prior work, they're desperate for this. So you can do the math as far as, do you want this? How badly do you want
Right,
this?
I see. Okay, thank you.
Can I leapfrog on that a little bit, Matt? And I'm curious if this is a question for Mark, but so with examples like this, obviously this one was purchased as open space and a housing project, so it was a bit of a combine. But where BOSAC advocates for purchasing of a parcel for open space, and McCain's kind of an example of this, what limitations are there upon those parcels for future programming? So like, if, we start to get backed up in town and we need infrastructure at some level, what happens to some of those open space parcels that we have chosen not to add any programming onto? If it's just an open space, is there anything that kind of protects the work that we've done? Curious.
Well, it's a relationship you have with the council. One, they're gonna want to, honor whatever they've discussed before. But if it's not in the master plan, for example, or, documented as the use for that, then other things are allowed.
Gotcha.
In the federal system, there is a concept called color of money, which means that you can only use certain funds for certain things. And wouldn't our open space funds, they're dedicated, the enabling legislation for them said this is dedicated to open space and trails, not to gas pipelines and housing. So.
But with DNR, we did use housing money as well. Right. So it's not as clean of a slate, so to speak. And when we've talked about open space on McCain, the areas that we've actually paid for, which years ago, we paid for a third of McCain when the original acquisition of the 120 acres was done. A third of that property and everything on the west side of the river was designated essentially for open space permanently. No one's ever argued that at all. And now more recently, this 15 acres of the open BOSAC and open space fund have put into has kind of locked that up as well. But the other areas that, open space didn't make an active contribution for more, yeah, they're subject to the whims of what's changed the master plan because we need this and this is a high priority.
Mm-hmm.
But the question really had to do more with like this little piece of land for the DNR, that the part that we bought, the percentage that BOSAC, the open space money funded. That wouldn't be able to be used for anything else once the Excel project is gone.
Well, it could be used for housing. I mean, there was a percentage that went in from both.
But the
So we just
percentage
have-
that would be BOSAC, the open space funds, that percentage of that land wouldn't be
More or
able to be
less. We'd
used.
have to talk that through what that looks like. But yes, the idea would be we would still maintain some open space there. We would have some housing. And kind of to Dave's point, this is intended as a temporary use. And so it's going to be reclaimed. So it's not a long-term impact on the
Okay. I'm curious if down the road, if we ever discover a parcel that, is just so important to the open space program, if there's a higher designation that we might want to explore for, I know we've talked about Cucumber Gulch as a preserve or some of these things, but is there anything that we want to keep in our toolbox if we find a parcel, or if we have an existing parcel that we want to ensure is not developed for future programming, because obviously the priorities of town's going to ebb and change with different councils and different governments. So, I'm just curious what we can do to lock some of these down for permanent open space.
I was just gonna offer in that, master plan, we have the conservation overlay, but I can't at the moment recall any specific parameters as for it prohibiting use, but I do,
Biggest protection is if you have a conservation property. Now, we never really feel we need to do that with our property, but we're gonna do the right thing with it. The other thing that's out there, and I know the counties use this a little bit, is they actually have an open space zone district. And they have, put some of their open space properties into that district. And that kind of gives it, land use protection in terms of that's its zoning for the property. So, we don't have anything quite like that. We did have a discussion a few years ago about, is that something we should create as a new land use district in the town? But that was something that had a lot of traction from, OSAC, maybe that's something we could explore more.
There's been more and more overlaps in our conversations. I'm just kind of curious what we might be best served to set ourselves up to maintain those open space in the future, but thanks. Appreciate it, Mark.
I second that. At the last meeting, I had a similar question when we were talking about density, and we have a great relationship now with the town and with council, but how do we protect ourselves in the future? And my question was more about selling property back to private property after we purchase private property and what a future town could do. So kind of in the same vein, I think it'd be interesting to have a conversation about what kind of protections we can put on the things that have been designated as open space. Again, because we have such a good relationship right now in this community, but who knows what's gonna be in 50 years.
I also think that would be something that our new lawyer ought to address with us, because normally if a funding source is specific for a purpose, which our funding source is, you can't just decide you're gonna use it for some other purpose. And I think that would be a good question for the lawyer to come in and talk with us about, so that we understand what our parameters are, and if we do need to do something else in addition to that, or just rely on that.
well, I'm curious how that works as far as our master plan. Does that become like an appendix, or how do you make modifications if we wanted to add something, parameters like that?
Well, I think what Mark is saying is that just the funds don't encumber a future council from deciding what to do, just because the funds.
Well, that's a question for the lawyer.
I guess I'm still curious about what I just asked though. How does that, when you make an addition or an amendment to the master, like how easily is that done? The master plan?
Yeah. I don't know how it was written exactly in terms of if it had any discussion like additional addendums can be added to this or whatever, but it seemed like my recollection was it was intended to be a fluid document.
Yes.
Supposed to be static, or
Right.
couldn't do that. So
Yeah.
I think we could look into that, but I think there would be an opportunity to do some type of appendix, something to address that.
But still, I mean, the master plan is just still our guidance. It's not legally binding, so a future town could still utilize open space for whatever they wanted. That is separate from the master plan, unless, I agree with Bobby, like unless it was interpreted differently about what the funds were meant to be for and how, there's a difference between what the funds are used to purchase and what you end up using that land for. That distinction is kind of the question. So I think it's worth talking about putting it in the master plan, but it's not going to give us the protection that if we're worried about that sort of protection, I don't think the master plan, it could be a good place to start, but I don't think it's going to give you the protection that we're looking for, if that's what we're looking for.
And Nikki, to your question, I asked Scott Reed the same thing earlier or later last week. And he just said that staff will return with a revised plan, like the one that's in the packet is preliminary. He says that there's multiple iterations right now, and that staff will return with a revised plan for council's review in the coming months. So the master plan can be changed pretty easily.
Staff is already planning that?
Yes, that they are working up different iterations right now to
Of our
present
master plan?
of the McCain master plan.
Okay.
I mean, the game master plan's been modified at least 3 times. Needs change, but I think the intent, every council member I've talked to is to honor the open space that has been designated that, open spaces contribute towards.
Okay. That was great. Good talk about all that stuff. Anything else on staff summary? Okay. We will move on to our open space and trails discussion. So dogs on town of Breckenridge open space and trails. So we'll have JJ come on down.
Yeah, I'd like to welcome JJ McGill. Thanks for coming. She can sit at the table if you wherever you want to be, JJ. You can be at the table. Well, have a seat. She's the director of Summit County Animal Control, and I invited her here just to provide her expertise on, her experience. She provided the data that showed an increase in responses, but also she knows the limitations and capabilities of what they're able to do and how everything works. And if you're like me, you didn't know a lot about this issue until you started learning as people brought it up. And I figured it'd be best to have JJ here to answer questions that staff can't. Thank you for coming, JJ.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
JJ, do you want to, I'm not sure if you saw the memo that went out to us in our packet. That's okay if you didn't.
No.
That's okay. Maybe you could walk us through just some general key points about the program and considerations and things you spoke about with Duke.
Remind me a little bit. That seems like forever ago.
So most concerning are just an increase in incidence of uncontrolled dogs in open space, and how one thing I think that would be helpful is how do responses work, or, the town versus the county, and then when does animal control get involved, and what are you seeing, and what are you guys and girls able to do, and what are your limitations, and what have you seen to be effective measures to help improve conditions, I think all of that.
So is your main question about how we're handling dog complaints now in open space areas? And okay. So if somebody reports, right now we don't have enough staff for animal control to be very proactive. So we're being reactive right now. So we respond to calls that come in. If we had more animal control officers, then we could be proactive by walking bike paths, walking busy trails, issuing failure to control citations of what we see on the trails. Right now we respond to calls and complaints. So if somebody calls in a complaint, then we do our best to investigate that, see if there was a violation, and then we, depending on the circumstance, handle it with a warning and education or citation and fines. It'd be nice to be more proactive because we do have a rise in people using the trails, more people with dogs using the trails, more interactions with people and dogs, and just dog versus dog. And some of these interactions are with animals on leash anyways, so it's not necessarily just a problem, but off leash definitely does play a role in that too.
I have a question for you. So when somebody calls about a dog anywhere in the county, Summit County has agreements with all the jurisdictions to respond to all, or do the individual jurisdictions respond and then call animal control? How does that work?
Yeah, so our animal control officers get calls that are in areas that are unincorporated county.
Okay.
So any town jurisdictions, it's usually the police departments that are handling those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So one of the things that we were talking about in kind of earlier discussions about this was how dispatch handles and categorizes calls. So we were trying to understand of the calls, because I think we had got some data from you or from dispatch that just kind of loosely categorized different kinds of calls. But we were wondering if there is an ability to maybe parse that out a little bit, to be a little bit more specific on whether or not the calls for service, or if there was, you know, a dog person interaction, negative interaction, or something happens and it was in a neighborhood or, you know, off of Main Street versus on a trail. It might help us understand for this group how much of a problem is this on our open space for a service town, county areas. Is that possible, or is that, do we have that data?
So are you asking more location specific data?
Yeah.
Yes, I can do unincorporated county because I can only do stats
Right.
for our department. But if you have specific areas, I can definitely take that data out of a street or a road, or I can just do trails and that
Okay.
type of stuff. That's what you're asking, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But we would be able to go to 911 to maybe get that same kind of data for, say, within town of Breck limits on town trails.
I would think so. Breck PD though is their community service officers are usually who handle their animal calls.
Great.
So they might be tracking their own better and in more depth than maybe dispatch is.
Great.
Do you have any data or feelings on like where the calls are coming from a guest or visitor standpoint versus a resident?
A good combination of both. We don't typically see a lot of more out of state. It's usually in-state visitors and locals, because I don't think there's a high percentage of out of state visitors that are bringing their pets with them. But we do see like neighboring counties that are using the trail systems, Denver folks a lot, and then locals, of course. So we are seeing more in-state people using it with their animals.
Thank you.
I was actually gonna ask the same question because I'm wondering in terms of like the how to be more proactive question, what sort of resources there might be for, like, if, I mean, it's hard because we're a destination, so we're never gonna, like, this isn't just a local problem. These aren't just local interactions, but is there a centralized area for dog, like, training or like here's, because like, I'm not suggesting we go to like the Boulder, like your dog goes to school thing, but like in order to be off leash, but it does steer you to your dog needs to be under control. Here are some resources. Here are some local people that do that. Does that exist? I know there are individual locals that do that, but is there any sort of centralized list?
Yes, so our animal shelter has a list of local pet groomers, dog trainers. We have a whole resource list for pets. So we do have a list of people for that. And we do, that's on our website. You can access that on our website. People call in a lot for it, so we will email it individually. It goes out with anybody who adopts a dog. That goes out automatically in all their adoption bags. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Well, Kristen, regarding what you just said about Boulder's program, we do, and I learned this from you, JJ, or from Duke, was that we do have a mandatory licensing program or system. How well is that utilized?
So unincorporated county, we do have a mandatory licensing program for dogs. Cats are voluntary. We recently moved to a system this year called DocuPet, so it can be done online instead of people coming into our office or mailing. They also handle all the communication for follow-ups or expirations or licensing coming up. It's been a lot easier for our staff to use and has freed up some staff time. It's also made some of our license numbers go up in just a short time from June when it went active to now. because people can do it from their couch now, instead of having to try to find the time with working around their jobs and their home life to come to the shelter to license their dog. And it's helping us be a little bit more proactive in that front, instead of um, just ask, contacts that we come into to see if they have all the parties have their dog's license. Now you can go to a public event and you can license from a QR code right there at the event. And the way we're using that to try to not, we get pushback from that of, why do you need that money? Well, one, it's rabies control, but that doesn't always sell people on keeping their license up to date. With DocuPet, you as the pet owner can manage your whole profile. So, and you can report your pet lost without even having to call the shelter and do a loss report with us. So that loss report will go to anybody else that's has a DocuPet account as well. So you can just go on their website and see pets lost in my area and get all their info. And then it's more owner or person to owner contact, and can skip a trip to the shelter. Another cool feature that we've been using to try to encourage folks to license their dogs is in a wildfire situation or an emergency evacuation, we can look up street names or subdivision names and find out how many pets we are potentially having to evacuate. We'll have their owner's info, and we can have a volunteer start calling those people and see, is your pet at home? Do you have it with you? And instead of waiting for emergency evacuation requests like before, now we can be proactive on that front and actually start contacting pet owners that we know are in the area. So we're getting a little more traction on that front of people wanting that service, instead of feeling like, well, why do I have to license my pet? Of course it's current on rabies. So we're getting more traction with that. We do license for Town of Blue River and Town of Silverthorne and Dillon, because they don't do their own licensing program. But Briscoe, and I understand Breckenridge, you go to the town hall and they handle their own licensing.
So that system's less about dog conflict and more about if they were potentially lost.
Yes, because we don't use their licensing system to mark conflict or incidents.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit, I'm just curious about the process. So, you have a dog conflict, a dog bites someone, and you guys get a call, then what are the steps that happen next in that whole process?
Sure. So when we have something like that, where a dog bites another animal, we always make sure that their rabies is up to date, because that's our biggest concern as far as diseases and things like that, and do rabies control. That's one thing animal control does. So if their rabies is current and their dog bit a human, then the dog can do a 10-day quarantine at home and has to be either seen by our staff or a veterinarian if they're not in the area, to make sure that they're healthy at the end of 10 days. If their animal is not current on rabies and it bit a human, they have to come do that quarantine at the shelter, where they have to pay impound fees. So that's another reason for folks usually to have their pets current. If a dog bites another dog, we don't do a rabies quarantine for dog versus dog. Then we investigate how the incident occurred, and who might have had a violation and who might be liable. So is it a dog that was off leash that approached an on leash dog? Or an off leash dog that wasn't in control of the owner at the time when it contacted a human. Or we've had dogs that the owner is on the end of the leash the whole time, but they're getting drug over to the other person and the dog bites the person. They're liable because they weren't under control of their dog. So then we're going to write a summons for that, because if that person has any out-of-pocket expenses for medical treatment or care, or say the offending dog injured the other party's dog involved, they're responsible for their vet bills. And so if they can satisfy that restitution prior to the court date, then that it won't go to court. But if they can't, or we don't have all the bills in place by the time the court date comes around, then it goes through court. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then like repeat offenders,
Mhm.
do you have like double doggy probation, or
Yeah, so we have three offense systems. So the first offense is going to be the minimal amount of fines. Second offense, it goes up. Third offense is gonna be a mandatory summons for most of our violations. If it's egregious enough, or the injury is egregious enough, then we can charge dangerous dog or go state dangerous dog. If we go state dangerous dog and a dog kills another animal or a human or does serious bodily injury, that dog is mandatory to be euthanized. And we have had a couple of cases this year where they've had mandatory euthanasia. Most, I would say, fall under summons and restitution satisfied.
Do you know if the town of Breck has that same rule about a dog whose rabies vaccine is not up to date being mandatory quarantine, not in the owner's house, but at the town?
They should, because we do get town of Breck impounds for bites and things, and we do assist other towns or the towns with cases if they have questions. I know in the past, as an animal control officer, I did do trainings with the police departments on their responsibilities for rabies control and how to handle those. But the turnover has been so great that we'd probably have to do it every 6 months or every year.
Because recently we had an experience in my family and they let that dog whose rabies shot was out of date stay at the owner's house. So maybe
Okay. Yeah.
contacting them would be a good thing.
Mhm.
I have a question. How often do you find that, if there's an incident, how many times out of 10 is the person and the dog, the offending person and dog identified, and how many times do they just kind of?
I would say we have a
Other words.
high rate of identification because most often they'll get the owner's information. It's not usually us finding it. Most often they're getting that at the scene and reporting that to us. Because there are some cases where they don't get that and somebody's able to drive away before we can get to the scene. So most of the time that's done between the two parties.
That's good.
Mhm.
With incidents, how many percentage would you say could have been prevented? Like if the owner had done this, or if they had, how is it often where maybe some better ownership or education could have been prevented the incident from happening? Where I think some incidences, the owners maybe had done the best thing they could and it still happened. Like, what is that percentage, would you say?
Yeah, there's always cases where I truly believe there's nothing anybody could have done. It just occurred. I would say that it's a very high percentage of if owners had a little bit more training with their dog or training themselves, that these circumstances could be avoided. I would say overall the public is not as educated about animals as I would hope that they would be. And oftentimes they put their dogs in positions or places that they weren't set up well to succeed.
Have you noticed any impact on better, I know one of the things that's in our packet is about having better signage about responsibilities. Have you ever seen that do anything much?
I don't know. I mean, I think signs at popular trails is great, but we can't force them to read it, or understand it. I think sometimes people think, well, I'm in this open space area or on national forest, who's gonna come notice that I had my dog off leash? And then they run into somebody, or they run into somebody who's riding a bike past. And I truly believe that most people think that their dogs are more well-trained and behaved than they are. And so you are running into that type of circumstance too, where they didn't believe that their dog wouldn't come back to them when they ran into a moose or, had a bike go by. And I think that's all on the owner of preparation and training and making sure you're setting them up to succeed, because there are a lot of distractions having your dog off leash in this area, or on leash for that matter too.
I know every dog that's ever lunged at me has been a friendly dog.
Right. Yes, exactly. Oh, it's friendly as it's like 30 feet away from its owner.
Baring teeth and snarling.
Mhm.
Question about staffing, and sorry if I missed this somewhere in the packet, but it shows that you guys are down 2 ACOs. What is staffing level right now? And I'm kind of curious, what is optimal?
We're actually full staffed.
Okay,
So we have 4 animal control officers, one of those being a supervisor. And we have 2 on per day right now, and then 1 on call every night to respond to emergency type stuff. It would be great if we could get, 1 would be wonderful, 2 would be ideal. Because if we could have close to 3 on every day, or at least 3 on most of the week, then we could do more proactive things. In years past, I've been working for animal control since 2012. And our numbers continue to go up. And before, when I was an officer early on, it was easy for me to go walk bike paths and have time to go walk trails and to be at more events or more busy areas. Right now, they're just running call to call to call to call to call all the time. And so being able to do that just doesn't happen. And then they're more in-depth calls too. So they're spending a lot more time doing reporting. We now have body worn cameras. We now have dash cams. So we have to label and report all of that and review all of it. So the standards have gone up and changed too, which takes more time. But I do think, I hate bringing up COVID, but COVID played a piece in it, as far as I think we're seeing an increase of dog occurrences and incidents because a lot of these dogs have grown up being more isolated. They didn't go to obedience training classes. They didn't have other resources available like maybe previous dogs that those people have had. And so the socialization is different.
thanks. You guys do a great job, so appreciate it.
Thank you.
In our packet, there was a letter from Alicia Vargo, who's here. Alicia, did you want to come say something about you can, if you don't mind stepping up to I know you're on crutches, but if you don't mind stepping up to the mic, just so our virtual audience can hear you. Yeah, on a ramp.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you guys for letting me join in. And it's really interesting hearing from JJ and kind of what goes on from their end of the spectrum with dogs and open spaces. This is something that this summer has kind of come to the forefront of my life and my family's life. I want to come clean that I'm a dog lover. If you put some puppies in front of me, I would just melt into a puddle. So I know that this is a little bit sensitive because many of us are dog lovers. And I want to just first come across that, like, I'm not anti-dog. But since moving to Summit County, I definitely have kind of had to adjust my trail behaviors in being on guard because I've had such a high frequency of incidences with dogs. And I think it's partly because we live in this beautiful place where people love having their dogs outside. A lot of people are recreating, and I think that's really amazing. That's part of the reason that my family and I sought out this community. We love it, and I love that people can be out with their dogs. But now that I'm reflecting on this with like a little different lens, I think that there's perhaps maybe just this sense of laxity with like how we handle our dogs out on the trails. And up until the summer, I didn't even know that I could call and report a dog incident. I just kind of took it and I'm like, phew, got away that time, or like, at least it just ripped my clothes. It didn't actually bite my skin, or like, at least my kids weren't here this time. But it's definitely something that from my perspective is a problem, or has become a problem. And I don't know what it used to be. I just know what it's like now. And this summer, you might have read in your packets, but I had a really bad dog attack, where it wasn't one of those like got away from the dog this time. The dog actually took me down really hard in a somewhat traumatic way. And the crutches are just an indication that like 3.5 months later, I'm still dealing with the repercussions of that. And so I've had a lot of reflection about how I feel about this and how I feel as a recreator and how I feel as, you know, a former dog owner, a future dog owner, like how these things kind of mesh together. And I don't really have answers, but I love hearing that it at least is at the forefront and something that's being discussed. Hearing JJ talk about how they are understaffed and we just have hundreds of miles of trails and dirt roads, it would be impossible to police all of that. But I think that one of the biggest issues is there's just not an awareness of what behaviors are acceptable or not. Like I didn't know that that your dog has to be within 10 feet or voice command. It's kind of crazy thinking that, because a lot of my dog altercations, the owner is like rarely even in sight to see it happen. And so I think that somehow creating more public awareness of what our expectations are. You mentioned Boulder, and I think Boulder is a very, extreme end of the spectrum of what is expected of dogs and dog owners. But everybody knows what their expectation is there, right? And so if you aren't complying with that, it's easy as somebody out on the trails to be like, hey, your dog can't be doing that. Your dog can't approach me and be jumping on me like that, or jumping on my mountain bike, or coming up to my kids like that. But I feel like here, I don't, at least me personally, I don't feel like I have leverage to say anything. It usually ignites some sort of altercation. My dog's friendly. They never do that. While they're baring their teeth at you or, chasing you. So like I said, I don't have the answers, but I would just love, to give a nudge for this to continue to be something that's thought through, in fairness on both sides, for recreators, for dogs, for the protection of other dogs and wildlife, I think, as well. So that's my 2 cents in a nutshell.
Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you, as a sort of case study, speak to your process with your medical expenses and how that's unfolded for you?
Sure. So the day that the incident happened, as soon as I got home, I called animal control and spoke with someone at animal control and kind of described the immediate situation. And then we were reassured that our medical bills would be taken care of. The owner was issued summons and restitution. And so that was a little bit of a relief as I started to kind of go through the process of figuring out what kind of injuries I was dealing with and what the future was going to look like. And as a side note, so the injuries were lumbar fractures, and something that wasn't discovered until later was that when the dog came after me the second time, and it hit me like full speed right in the kneecap. So now I'm trying to heal up a fractured tibial plateau and a bunch of soft tissue damage. And my pelvis was like badly displaced, just kind of like a whole battering of things. So as we started to kind of unravel that and, get the right images and treatment plan, it was reassuring to know that the medical bills were going to be taken care of, because at first my thought was like, okay, heal the bones. I'm back to normalcy. Like, I'm back on the trails. I'm back to being able to take care of my kids appropriately. But then things just got more messy and complicated. And I think like a lot of kind of traumatic or like high impact injuries, what you feel on day one could be very different than how things surface 1 week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later. Like, injuries just kind of start to come to surface, or like, so that was very reassuring, because we all of a sudden were paying a lot of money out of pocket, and in addition to what insurance was covering. And our initial communication with this whole process was through animal control, and then was eventually turned over to the DA. And around that time, we requested the offense report of every communication between us and animal control and the owners. And we were a little bit floored in that the situation was like definitely very minimized. And I don't know if that was perhaps I didn't like fully state like, no, this is bad. I'm very hurt. But there definitely, were multiple fractures. And in the offense report, it stated that I had some cuts and scrapes and the dog knocked me down, which was definitely not what happened. It was like a 2-part attack. So I was a little worried when I saw that. I'm like, oh, wow, this is like definitely being really underplayed. I hope this isn't going to cause a problem. And eventually when the case was turned over to the DA, all of our communication was with them, which it was pretty minimal initially. And then the first court case was held, and then we kind of didn't get any communication, and we found out 2 weeks ago that the charges were dropped. So all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, this incident that was totally preventable, totally negligent, now has become this pretty massive financial stress for our family. And I think it's caused a little bit of panic, like, wow, like we kind of thought that there were these systems in places to take care of incidents like this. And for some reason, ours just kind of fell through the cracks or dissolved. And I don't want anybody else to experience that, because it is caused multiple layers of stress and difficulty. And so I think talking about, how do we prevent things like this from happening is a very important piece of the puzzle, but also if things do happen, how to make sure that if somebody is badly injured, if an animal is badly injured, how are we going to make sure that we are protecting those victims so that they're taken care of appropriately, is also an important piece of the puzzle. And perhaps my situation was just a glitch in that process, but it would be really good to be out on the trails recreating and feel more protected, but also feel more protected if something happens, that like, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, we're going to be taken care of. Like, there's a process that we go through. And yeah, I feel like obviously there's probably a spectrum of experiences, and this is maybe more on the difficult negative side. And so I acknowledge that fully, and I don't feel angry about it, but I just feel like, this needs to be better. So that would kind of be my thoughts at this point in time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing that. I think it really helps inform this conversation. So
Mhm.
does anyone have any questions for Alicia? We're good there. Thank you, Alicia. We really appreciate you sharing and writing a letter. So,
Of course. So.
yeah.
Thanks.
Do we have other questions for JJ?
I guess this is totally not your job, but just curious, we're saying like signage might be helpful, but you can't force people to read signs. I really resonate with like your comments on, while we won't be doing like a Boulder class, like it is, everyone knows that that's a thing. Like when you bring your dog to Boulder, there is a lot more understanding of what your dog needs to do to be off leash in Boulder than they do in Summit County. So I guess I'm just curious if you have any suggestions beyond signage that you think would be helpful for us to consider.
Probably social media would be our biggest and quickest impact. But because most of our population, well, they are visiting, but they're state of Colorado visiting, is what we're seeing with interactions with dog owners. That might be a good way to go. I know we've been thinking about that too, of how else can we think outside of the box to solve this problem too, of more education, more understanding. I think social media is our place to start.
I love the comments you had about like having COVID dogs. I think mine is probably one of those, like with a lot of social anxiety. And I feel like I would definitely sign up for a class that was like, is your dog a COVID dog? Like, do you need training 4 years in? Yeah, just like more opportunities for letting locals know about the training resources in this county, I think could be a good consideration.
Could you speak to, would you met with Merge, what their feedback was on this specifically?
Alex, do you want to field that? I mean, you go ahead, Alex.
They kind of, they're like, oh, we get that one a lot, and, you know, we don't have them actually answered. But they definitely just said lean on the regulatory and consequential, like signs, like, we talked about initially, I think, Bobby or somebody brought up that there should be signage kind of letting you know, like, what will happen if violate that. And Merge kind of said, anything that has in red text and has consequences typically works pretty well. But to be honest, they kind of not joked it off, or like, I wish we could have a magic answer to that, but there's probably a number of ways to approach it, part of the protective signage. Like, not just that regulatory, but maybe it's also some educational. But I think that they drove home that really want to get the point across, maybe have that kind of consequential type language. But that's something we can follow up on and inquire more, but to be honest, it's one recommendation over the other.
Okay.
Maybe with social media, it wouldn't be just educating the dog owner, but educating the person who has been impacted by the dog.
Yeah.
Here's who you call if you're here. Here's who you call if you're in town. Here are your rights. Get the dog owner's name and phone number and address, you know. When my husband got bit, we were in such a state of shock, we didn't ask. And the only reason they found him was because that dog had been on another police tape.
Yeah.
But knowing both sides of the equation, knowing where they should turn, I think.
Well, I think Alicia made a good point when you said you didn't know what number to call previously. And I think if there was a sign, I mean, we talked to staff about this, if there was a sign that had the number, not only would that be helpful for those who need it, but it's also a signaling to those with dogs that there might be repercussions and there are avenues by which to solve a potential problem. So I, for one, think that would be worth exploring. I'm pulling up our questions here. So does BOSAC support instituting suggested signage at major trailheads and increase social media education?
I think we should just continue to incorporate this into our conversation with Merge.
Yeah, when we met with Merge last week, it's kind of, they introduced us to like different categories of signage and how they're kind of layered in the system, and where we talked briefly, but we talked about where dog messaging could fit into that. And then, I think that's something that if they hear from us, that's something we want incorporated into our sign packages and it's this level of importance, then they can provide that.
And it really coincides with the Leave No Trace and 7 principles and us going after that gold standard. Part of that messaging is proper pet care. So we can incorporate that into the Leave No Trace messaging
Yeah,
we want to see out there too.
I think, doing that all together makes a lot of sense. I think right now we just don't have, it's like leash, not leash. That's pretty much our signage right now. So I think we have some opportunity to just create some more awareness about what are the responsibilities of dog owners. I don't think I knew the 10-foot thing before today, or before I read the packet either.
Yeah. I don't think you're alone.
I think we have a great communications department with Brooke and Annette and Flora that we can, if we, let them know that this is a priority for us, for them to kind of put that out and message the importance and what to do if you're in a situation like that.
And I still do think like linking to the resources that you've already gathered together would be helpful. I think sometimes it's hard to just not know where to start.
Right.
JJ, one thing, is it fair to say incidents spike in the summer? Like, is that when you have the highest rate? Yeah.
Yeah, because that's when you have the most hikers, the most bikers. In the wintertime, there's still people enjoying the trails, but it's not the volume that we see in the summer.
I'll ask this last question. Are there additional ideas for improving education for dog owners that we haven't talked about?
Is there any likelihood that town of Breck would take advantage and sign up for this DocuPet thing? That sounds like it's a fairly robust way to get a lot of information in one place, especially like the rescue business, if there is an emergency or a lost pet. It seems like something the town might want to.
I wrote it down, yeah.
You have the license, like to take your dog on the bus and everything. You have to prove that you have a license, I think. I don't know where else you have to, that ever comes up, but yeah, maybe streamlining with how the rest of the county does it would be a good idea.
Yeah, if you need any info on that, you can reach out to me. Great.
Anything else? Good on this? JJ, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sort of an emerging issue for some of us. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I think there's room for improvement. We just have to decide the best way to move forward with that. Because we just have so many people using trails in the last, there's been a big increase in the last 4 years, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again. And Alicia,
Having-
thank you for coming as well. Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. All right. So Ella and Lauren.
Ellen, Lauren, is this the right one? This PowerPoint?
Thanks for coming
Thanks for
and
having
waiting.
us. Yeah. Yeah, just going a little bit off of the continuing dog topic, when we do trail ambassadorship out on the trails, we do sometimes talk to people about dogs, and let them know like if it's an area you have to have them on a leash or not, and just saying hi and like, gauging whether the dog is like under control or not. We don't see, I guess, too many out of control dogs, but usually when we do talk to people, we definitely do get like pushback. Like, yeah, it's not a topic people like to have discourse about, even if it is like friendly naturalist.
Do they get rude to you about it?
Occasionally, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times it's people say, oh, well, I'm a local here, or they don't maybe quite understand like fully that they're not supposed to have dogs in the area, even when we are trying to explain it to them that they could potentially receive a fine for having their dog in an area where dogs are not allowed. Yeah, the last interaction that I had, the woman was quite rude to me. She said that I'm a local here, like I live in the area, I should be able to have my dog on this trail. And she just kind of walked away after our interaction of me informing her that she was not allowed to have her dog inside Cucumber Gulch Preserve.
And then I think, from that point, we try to be more of like, we're just looking out for you and we'd hate to see you get a ticket here.
Yeah.
Walking your
Yeah,
dog.
we try to say like,
Hey.
if it's in the preserve, usually it's for your safety because of the moose. Yeah, or. Just the like present.
Keyboard or anything?
Oh, yeah, I won't let you click anything.
What if you guys came closer? Sometimes a mouse is a little finicky when it's farther away. I'm not sure exactly.
I would try closing it and opening it again, maybe.
Plug it
Won't
back
even
in,
close now.
That's the only IT experience I have.
What internet tells me every day.
Get a little intermission here.
Yeah.
Like frozen nuts.
Yeah. That's my school.
What is all this? Yes. I invented Windows.
Oh, you look familiar.
What are you doing here?
Operating system, nobody can use
Hmm.
pervasive.
Are you rolling out Copilot? Because we are, and I get like a notification every single day that's like, here's how you do it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, AI. helping me, I don't know.
Packet?
It's funny because it's true.
Presenting like this? Sorry.
It has a video in it, so like, we kind of need the PowerPoint.
The
Yeah.
bottom, I think it's the last, one of the last sites, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one video.
I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to.
It'll probably work from the PowerPoint if you're not like in the presentation,
Yeah.
the actual slide.
Oh.
Won't let you.
Won't even let us
It won't-
do a
won't-
single thing. I
it
don't
won't
know
let you.
why.
Think about like try it now.
Patience.
I'm the one trying. I'm sure I'm not the real those guys.
No, don't do it.
Fruit utilization.
You were like direction with the same.
I'll try to figure out the video thing in the next couple minutes. If you guys feel comfortable presenting from here, I'll try to get the video in a different way. Yes.
Thank you.
Definitely. You, Alex. Next month. Alex isn't gonna be here, so we're just gonna be a low
Should probably just-
IT expectations.
Yeah.
Dry erase boards.
Yeah, exactly.
I
know, you're being
One
very-
chance to fix PowerPoint, otherwise you're out.
Oh, this is the old one too.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Okay. We made some edits since then. It's fine. All right. Thanks for having us again. We are the Open Space and Trails Naturalists. My name is Ella Garner.
And I'm Lauren Sawyer.
We do wildlife monitoring and reports in Cucumber Gulch, as well as guided hikes there and at other locations. We also do a variety of educational programming such as tables around trails at Breckenridge. So here's a photo of Lauren. We did an educational table up at Blue Lakes, helping with the county doing surveys this season. And then here's a hike at Cucumber Gulch Preserve.
So mainly working out of Gulch Preserve, we're helping to preserve and protect the rare fen wetlands there, as well as the beaver wetlands. Mainly we're working in the summer season, doing our surveys with beavers, as beavers are the keystone species inside the preserve. And we also mark certain data as our annual closure as well, May through July 5th, until we open until July 6th. Okay. And then we also have that dogs are never permitted inside Cucumber Gulch Preserve. Oh, I think that's this slide. Confusing. So during the annual closure of Cucumber Gulch Preserve, we close this due to fawning and calving as well as nesting season. So during this time in the closure, we're often roving around, making sure that folks aren't in there as well as dogs, and helping to enforce that. And then we also use this time to do wildlife and visitor use monitoring. So here we have some folks that were in the preserve, not only foraging, but walking their dogs.
Which those things are never allowed in the preserve, not only during closure, but ever.
Just mushrooms.
Yeah. Okay.
dogs on a leash.
All right, so just a little bit of about the visitor use during the closure. Like I said, no visitors are allowed in the preserve during the closure, May and June, mostly for moose calving season. We have added LED closed signs at the two main entrances, thanks to the PD, Breckenridge Police Department, and believe that's really helped cut down on numbers the last 2 seasons of people being in the preserve during closure. This year during the closure from May and June 2024, we saw 78 people and only 2 dogs in the preserve during that time. Here on the map, we have the 4 entrances. See my mouse. Oh, yeah. To the preserve are labeled Peaks Trailhead, White Wolf, Nordic Center, and Shock Hill. The Shock Hill and White Wolf are residential neighbor entrances, as well as near the Nordic Center, although there is public parking there. But most of the public parking is at the Peaks Trailhead. Also, people are getting off the gondola and accessing the preserve from the gondola, usually from the Peaks Trailhead, and they hike down and ride the gondola back up from Shock Hill. So we can estimate where people are coming from based on the direction they're going on the trail camera. This year was kind of opposite from last year. We had 70% of the trail users during the closure entering from the lower, so residential entrances, these 3, whereas only 27% of visitors during the closure were entering from Peaks, which is kind of the flip-flop from last year. So don't really know what that's from, but also during the closure, we had 78% hikers and 22% mountain bikers. And here we have some data from over the years. So like I said, we had about 78 people in the preserve this year during closure. That's just a little bit more than last year, but still down from 2022. So I would say that's still positive. And then dogs have also been consistently going down since 2022 as well. And here are some cute animals caught on the trail cameras during the preserve closure. We do see a lot of moose in the closure. There's a couple friends swimming.
So then we have a graph highlighting dogs in the preserve from 2022 to 2024. So as you can see that the numbers have gone down. So it seems that our signs have been effective in educating people that dogs are not allowed in this space.
Yes. Full year, not just closure.
So then we also have in this graph the number of animals on camera during the preserve closure, May through June, as well as the number of animals on camera during the preserve opening. So in blue, we have the number of animals during closure. We have this highlighting some of our main cameras where we're capturing a lot of our wildlife. And then in green, the number of animals in July and August during the opening. So as you can see here that the number has gone down when the preserve is open.
And these graph is showing number of individuals seen, not just number of captures. So they might be some of the same individuals, but they are just individual wildlife visiting the camera. No, wildlife, yeah. And then we break that down in the next slide, what wildlife. So in total, we had 17 different species of animals caught on our cameras this year. Most common one being moose. Aquatic birds we kind of grouped together, which included ducks, herons, and geese. We also have a lot of mule deer, muskrats, fox raccoons, saw a lot of pine marten, and smaller mammals and rodents this year as well. We haven't seen too many bear, and then no mountain lions this year again.
So here we have some photos during the opening of the preserve. So we have a collared mother moose here with her baby, a bear, this pine marten, and another bear.
then we did have a video we were hoping to show you guys because we did get a new camera that has video capabilities this year. So we were able to capture some really awesome footage of mother and baby moose. And I can say that we have seen this particular mother and baby moose every year in the preserve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So yeah, a beaver are the keystone species in the preserve, which we do bi-monthly monitoring for. So we wake up at sunrise and sunset. We watch them for 45 minutes twice a month. This year we've had a pretty drastic decline in beaver sightings in the preserve. As you can see on the graph, it was kind of going up steadily until 2022. And then last year we had a drastic decrease in beaver. And then this year we're not really seeing any beaver at all.
You attributed that to?
Well, that's mostly speculation at this point, because it's so recent that we're seeing this data, but in the last 2 years, there's just been more like development and construction along the perimeter of the preserve, particularly like right under the gondola at Shock Hill. For the last 2 seasons, they've been building this one house there. And I've actually seen it disturb wildlife. I saw a moose like running away from that area after a chainsaw. I had to jump in a bush from it and hide. So, I mean, it's just speculation, but I believe potentially like development and construction happening like really close to the edge of the preserve. And also beavers do just tend to move around every 3 to 5 years. When they eat up all the food within like 100-foot radius of their lodge, they will build a lodge somewhere else. So it could be because of food sourcing, as well as probably a variety of contributing factors.
Since it's described here as a keystone species, what are the implications for the gulch if they don't come back?
But, I mean, yeah, potentially if they stay gone from the area for a while, that big open like wetland area would go through the stages of succession. So drying out, becoming like forested again. But that would take quite a while of the beavers being gone, and then they might move back. Yeah, yeah.
Just grand, kind of leads that surveying effort. And I know that these numbers look pretty depressing, and there's definitely been a decrease in beaver. But we also think that they've moved deeper into the preserve where it's harder to monitor them from our observation points. So there is that like grain of salt she also believes that a number of them probably have moved on from the preserve or downstream. Where we're seeing a few more incidents along the Blue River this year, in areas that we hadn't seen them. So, maybe optimistically they're fine and they just moved along, but there certainly are ramifications to the preserve if we keep seeing these patterns. But fingers crossed, we're continuing to monitor through the rest of the month in October. And we're going to try to get in a little deeper and trigger some more. But we've been trying that as well. So it's been tricky this year. But I did just want to say that there's a little bit of optimism from ecometrics that there's still a healthy population in there that we're just having issues with.
I will say we have in the past had declining beaver. Back, I think it was 2012, we had that big blowout event from that 60-inch culvert. It basically watered all the upper wetlands. And we basically didn't see any beaver in the upper part of the gulch for a year or two after that. They eventually came back and recolonized and started building their dams and that again. Little different situation, but has happened before.
Yeah, we think that they will return, either maybe not the same beaver that left, but like the grand beaver, if you will. And it is still optimum habitat for the beaver, so there's no reason that they wouldn't return. But yeah, implications of lack of keystone species could be habitat loss of wetlands and food source loss of like willows, which of course is the main food source for moose as well. We have hope alive.
Good.
So now we have some data on our guided hikes. So this season we offered guided hikes at Illinois Creek and Iowa Hill, as well as in Cucumber Gulch Preserve. Guided hikes were offered twice daily in the preserve through July and August, and additional locations are provided for alternatives to hiking in the preserve during the closure, as well as for groups larger than 7. So here we have a graph in our attendance numbers for the season, depending on location. And then we have a graph here on hiker demographic for folks that were here in Colorado, out of state, and then those that were attending from Summit County.
And yeah, additionally, this September, we're doing some hikes at the new Mineral Hill Trail near the B&B trailhead. So we are still doing the guided hikes. We've had a little bit of decrease in numbers from last year, but we're working with BTO to do more promotion and things like that. So they're still going well.
I'll give a shout out to Ellen for that website. Kind of difficult going from the rec center to our new website and hosting all of that on our own. So we did see numbers kind of decrease this year, but got a few creative outlets, I think, to get on some backup.
Did I hear you do like a berry one too?
Yeah.
Alex was.
Yeah, we got into foraging education
That's
this
so cool.
year, and we did a lot of foraging hikes, not in the preserve, of course, but at Iowa Hill and Peaks Trail. And then we also did some education stations about berries where we had different samples of all the berries at like Illinois Creek. Yeah.
Do you have any flyers? Do you have?
Yes.
Because I'd like some to put in my condo complex. We're
Okay.
Almost all out of town people.
Yeah. Definitely going to be needing to do some more promoting next year.
Any questions? Anything else?
I've just got one question. It's obviously we're happy to see that during the closure, there's been a lot more compliance. Do people, is there any signage that there are cameras or not?
No, it doesn't say anything like you are on camera, because the cameras are primarily for wildlife monitoring. But the camera is very visible and obvious from the trail. So it's not like it's a
Okay.
hidden
Yeah.
camera per se. But no, there are not any signs of that people are under surveillance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We had a couple of
sometimes-
people move our cameras and kind of mess with them. So yeah, our concern was maybe with the signage that it would actually draw more attention to the cameras and then draw people in to looking at them or moving them around.
Yeah. 'Cause if people think that the cameras are for them than wildlife, then they're going to want to like
Yeah.
cover them up
Yeah.
or.
We had one gentleman actually move the angle of our trail camera to avoid seeing the level that his dog was at.
Sophisticated.
So you couldn't see like waist or below.
Yeah, or any dogs walking on the trail. So that does kind of skew some of our data as well.
And we also had some
Gentlemen, that was
teenagers. Yeah. We also had some teenagers put some gum and a leaf over another camera lens. And we've had moose rub on the cameras and mess them up. So moose are just as much culprits as humans.
Great.
I know that, you spent a lot of time in the Cucumber Gulch, and, you know, the data speaks for itself that, more animals come out when, people are not there or less people are there. Just from your position, do you have any suggestions for minimization efforts, for future years for when people are allowed there of ways to kind of disrupt less, the animals in the ecosystem up there?
Yeah, just maybe like special signage, which I know they're already working to do. 2 years ago, we did get the special rules of the preserve signs, so that no foraging, the group limit size, no dogs. That was really helpful, because I think informing people that you're in a preserve and a preserve is different than any other trail. Just kind of making them aware that they're in a special place. So yeah, signage, but we have added a lot of signage and that seemed to help. So I think we're on the right track there. And then just us continuing to do ambassadorship. Yeah.
I spoke a little bit with Ellen Lauren before meeting with Merge one at a time. before meeting with Murray, just to get their kind of insight on what you just asked. And it did kind of lead to, I think, something that Murray could probably adopt, is maybe even a different color palette or something to really signify that you're in a nature preserve versus the rest of our trail system. So I mean, that kind of came up from, and then that was Ella and Lauren's idea, and let the merge, I think. We should adopt that. I think that key point, whatever we can do to kind of, let people know that the rules and regs.
Yeah. And like the town's only nature preserve and one of only 2 in the whole county, I think, is a fact not a lot of people know about. So
Is there any opportunity to like make the closure period earlier? Or are we committed to what we have now in terms of closure?
That's something I can look into. I'm not sure if that's a concrete date or.
well, generally the Nordic Center or the Nordic goes to the end of April. I know specifically 2 years ago, they extended the closing date till May 9th. So it actually was going into the closure. So oftentimes the Nordic closing date is at the end of April, and sometimes they even extend it into May,
Do we have any?
depending on the
control
snow
over
year.
that? In terms of, do we have any control over them encroaching into that period that we normally close to?
Well, I think we could, because I mean, it's all town land. And they have a lease with us to operate on it, so if we really want it, good. I know they try to coincide that typically, if they can, with the skier. And then the ski area is not allowed to, basically, they have to stop using the gondola at a certain point in time. Start running buses up, and that's usually around the same time. So that's.
Yeah, I believe the gondola started running this year mid-June. So even that kind of intersected a bit with the closure. More than I remember in previous years. It was more like the end of June it started running. So
Bobby, I can confirm this and follow up, but I believe the agreement is a 45-day dark period for the gondola. And I don't know about the Nordic Center. So that, if we closed gondola earlier, the skier would be then allowed to open it earlier too. It's just, they're obligated to those 45 days and not necessarily more.
And it doesn't do any good to close the preserve to people unless the gondola isn't running over it and making all that noise. I mean, I know that's part of why we don't want it running all the time. Could we close it to people, and even if the gondola is operating under the 45, within that?
Yeah, but it's closed to people until July 6th, and it starts when the Nordic Center closes. So that's kind of to Mark's point. We can engage the Nordic Center and see if there's flexibility there, but those are the edges of the closure to people, is Nordic Center and then July 6th.
Right.
No.
nice.
Oh, it's not good. Anything else?
Thanks for all your education out there this season.
Yeah, make sure to watch that video. It's
Well,
it's a little bit sad because the mother is very malnourished in the video. Just to speak about, how much the mother moose do. They have to eat over 40 pounds of vegetation a day to be able to support a nursing calf moose. And a nursing calf moose drinks over 2 liters of milk a day. So the moose really need the plentiful food provided by the beaver, the keystone species, and all the habitat containing food. And she's probably at the end of her lifespan, which is kind of the reason why maybe nursing is taking a lot out of her, but it's just an interesting video because it might be the last year that we see that mother moose in the preserve.
Well, thanks, Ella and Lauren. We appreciate you guys and the naturalist program. It's so cool. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for keeping us around.
Thanks for
We
having
love
us.
All right, so virtual attendance at BOSAC meetings. Duke, do you want to clarify anything about this?
no, yes, only a little bit. This is up to BOSAC to decide. I put in the packet just examples of what council does and what the planning commission does, and Jay can speak to both, but this is something that Jay had brought up and up for your discussion on if you want to institute anything regarding virtual attendance.
Jay, do you want to give us, you have planning commission experience, town council experience, and BOSAC experience. So why don't you share your thoughts on the virtual piece?
Sure. I appreciate that, and thank you both for that introduction. I think when we moved in, when we had COVID, just kind of, we were talking about, hate going back to that discussion, but virtual meetings became necessary, and it was part of every conversation or in every meeting. And now, being 2 years removed, there's different decisions that kind of each commission, committee, council have to make on how we want to move forward. Having the meetings being live streamed and recorded is something that isn't being contemplated of removing. That is something that has been seen as increasing engagement with our community, allowing people that second homeowners to tune in, people that are interested in one subject to be able to watch, even if they have to be home with kids or job or whatever it is. And so that is not something that's being contemplated of removing the virtual aspect of being able to watch, to listen, to even have it recorded so that the general public can go and visit at another time or watch at another time. I think what the question should be is this committee here, is it better served to have everyone that is contributing present, or is it better to have input and interaction when commissioners are not present by a virtual dial-in? And again, I've talked to Mark about this quite a bit, and with planning commission, there is a different dynamic than BOSAC and a different dynamic than town council. And so I think to really look at what we do here and what you all do here and the discussions that are had, and whether that is something that is of interest to institute or not. All right.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jay. Anyone else want to dive in on this?
How does staff feel about this?
I don't think we have a strong opinion on this. Happy to support whatever restrictions or policies you institute, but yeah, as long as we have our technological hurdles cleared, we're fine with any.
Well, you already get rid of Alex because
He is not going to be here next month. I wasn't kidding. So-
But we're not having a meeting.
No, Dave, we don't have a strong opinion.
I don't really have a strong opinion. It is a little difficult to engage and, I don't know, to engage as a member of the virtual BOSAC. It's hard to engage. It's hard to engage with the person who's, I'm like pointing to the camera here. Like, it is difficult to jump in and kind of just disrupts the flow. I like the idea of being able to listen in and maybe having like a open comment section for the person that's on, if they wanted to, like, we could consider something like that if we wanted to, just say like, now's your chance to say what you needed to say about the agenda. And that might be a little bit easier because it is hard to hear people in both directions, and we're not really gonna get over that. So, but I don't really care either way. So.
I mean, I'd rather have the right people involved in real time. I suppose it is challenging and maybe slows things down a little bit, but I feel like on the outside chance that does happen, and I'd rather have that person with us rather than observing, I guess.
Yeah, to Kristen's point, the few times I've logged in virtually, it is hard to engage. And since we're not really a voting commission as much as we're a questions and answers commission, it's more just an opportunity to keep pace with everything that we're talking about. So as long as we can utilize it to attend virtually and listen, so we don't lose our place going forward. And Peter through the years has talked about it. He's like, more than 3 times a year is probably missing too much. I know we're not as rigorous, but that was kind of something we had talked about in the past, that it's kind of self-policing, but if you're missing more than 3, you're probably not contributing to the level that you should. So, but yeah, I don't think we need to change a thing. Doesn't seem broken.
What do you think, David?
Well, I agree with Chris. I think it's, I don't know, it's kind of both ways. Sometimes it doesn't work. And I don't know if it's based on the person or the topic at hand, or even just the technology. You never know what somebody has and oh, I didn't know it was on mute or whatever, it just kind of takes. I don't
Let's go
wanna
with the
really-
technology, not the
Yeah,
person.
we'll blame the technology, but, I feel like if that's how it works at council, if it works okay that way at council, then it's probably workable here as well. Like Chris said, we're not really getting into the situation where we're taking a lot of votes in most meetings. So.
Just to clarify, in council, we allow a council person that's not present to attend, to watch, just like anyone on the
Right.
public. But they are not asked to comment. They're not given any speaking rights. They're not allowed in executive session. So it's kind of, I think what Chris says, like, you can watch and be on track so you're not getting behind, but you're not called on for votes. You're not called in.
Yeah, I guess I like that. That's what, I don't know, I kind of feel like that would work. I think we probably need to be, assured that if there's ever some kind of a situation, let's hope it never happens again, where we would, if there's a certain number of people that are gonna have to be out, then maybe that we change that, rule. If there's gonna be a majority that for some, God forbid, we have something like COVID happen again, but you never know.
I think most of us use that only as a last resort. Every one of us would much rather be here in person, and it's only when, travel or something can't be adjusted for the schedule that any of us do it. Or if somebody's sick and doesn't want to bring it in to us, also a good reason to be
Right.
on the screen
You want to give
instead.
levity for that.
So I don't see not having it as an option as a good thing. I think none of us abuse it. We do it only when it's the last resort.
Okay. Sounds like, well, I would just offer, I do think it's helpful if the camera's on. I find it the disconnect more so when the camera's off. I'm curious if anyone wants to add to that, but Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason virtual wasn't allowed during exec session is because of potential exposure of private information to those who might be, if they're in a public space, or those who are around the person who's virtual. Is that the
Right,
case?
there was no way to ensure what was happening around
Mhm.
that other place.
Right. So I think that seems prudent, like a good way to go. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, would we want to put that in place for exec session, or? I recall Shannon, I think Shannon, our town manager, had expressed that concern. So that makes me want to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think then in that case? Yeah, as far as exec session, yes.
I remember if we ever had a virtual attendee in exec session. We may have, but I don't recall.
I don't actually recall either.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We
to me if
stopped the
they're
recording. Yeah.
on our
Okay. Okay. Stop the recording, but were they still on the video call?
Guess we could do that, but
I would,
Recording pause on their side.
We're already doing it in essence.
yeah.
Okay.
the one time I was on virtual, I think there was an exec session and it cut off.
Okay.
So I, didn't know anything.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Okay. So it sounds like we're good. Do we want to make any stipulations about the camera piece? Maybe just try if is that fair to say?
Try, yeah, you can try.
Be a part of our policy.
Such a BOSAC principle.
Just try.
Come on, just try.
A little square and not like the whole screen. I just am like thinking Duke when he had COVID and he was like. Oh.
But I was there.
You were there and on camera.
That's because Duke's a trier.
Yeah.
So can I ask for clarification?
Yeah.
Is it, we want to allow virtual for normal meetings, but do we want, I heard a difference of opinion in terms of if we wanted those people to actually be speaking or just listening.
My sense was people were okay with contributing. Is that
I'm okay.
the case? Is that your sense, David?
I wanted silence.
Oh, okay. Are you okay to?
I'll go
Good
with the
job.
group. I'm gonna over contribute though next time,
Oh,
just to get
great.
y'all back.
Great. Look forward to it.
Because an alternative could be if you wanted to pre-submit comments to the chair or something, if you're like, I really wanted to comment on this piece of the agenda, but it is disruptive to try and chime in. You could, pre-submit your comments to the chair or staff. Yeah, that's an option. But that doesn't help with like the discussion, like obviously.
Yeah,
things
right.
can
Because when
be-
the discussion
Yeah.
goes on, conversation develops and your thoughts.
Like, Nikki, say this. I'm fine with contributing, but I think maybe we all just have, if we go this route, that we have an understanding that you are not going to contribute as well or as forcefully as you would if you were in, and if you can't hear, you can't hear, and that's too bad, kind of thing.
Yeah. Just to clarify for Mark, is that your sense contributing's
Yeah,
okay?
the more I read the council verbiage, I think we're probably smart just to parallel what they do.
Be no contribution.
No contribution, but you are a documented attendee, but you're not contributing and you're not attending executive sessions. I think for simplicity, just the parallel with them would probably be best. My opinion.
And I'm in favor of not being in executive session, but I think that you ought to be allowed to contribute during a meeting that you're attending, even if it's virtual.
Jay, what's your take?
It's tough because, when you look around, you're like, oh, no, I'm fine if Kristen's virtual, or, Chris, if you're virtual, it's fine. I know that you'll be respectful and keep the camera on and keep your comments to maybe one group of comments that summarizes your entire position instead of like bopping in and out. Yeah, I will. Hey, can I say, wait, what about, but I think that this is something that we want to set for future, committees and how it goes and looking with, in each of these chairs with different faces that I don't know or that I don't have a rapport with, leads me to a kind of a different opinion than looking at you all right now and going, well, no, I know you guys. And I think these norms and these rules that we kind of set, and council did during our retreat, we did probably a 4-hour exercise of putting things on notepads of what was important and came up with a bunch of norms. And at the time, it kind of seemed a little silly. It's like, oh, listen to each other. And I think I sent you the norms or whatever it is. Don't interrupt and don't pass judgment. Don't come in with preconceived notions and all this. And but again, it was something to set for moving forward with as things move around. And so I think that putting that in that perspective, and having that, I see both sides. I really do. And I would respect the majority of the council. And I think that in general, being able to witness and to be able to listen and stay up to date, and be able to send your comments beforehand to the chair is probably preferable.
Okay. I don't
Like
know where
pretty
I'm at.
neutral. I don't. I can be swayed either way on this one.
Going around.
I don't know. I don't know.
I'm a no
Well,
contra- I'm
okay.
following council.
Oh.
My vote is.
Oh, see, you switched.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
Been at the whole time.
That's what I've been at the whole time.
Silent.
Oh, I thought you said you were okay and you were gonna get back at us later.
Well, if I lost my.
Oh, I
my
see.
moves, yeah,
Okay,
I'm gonna be back
okay,
at you all,
okay.
Like
See,
usual.
Okay, I
See
understand.
those?
So Kristen,
on
I'm
your-
sorry we're going round and round, but I want to get this right and to clarify for staff, don't harass me. Kristen, are you switching?
No, I don't care.
HR in the building?
Yeah, if it's simpler to streamline and do what council is doing, I am fine with that, if that is what the preference is.
Okay. I
Because
think,
it is hard, I appreciate your comments, it's hard, like, just like my previous ones, it's hard to dictate this for future groups, we might not be as cohesive, or I might not know them, or they might be bad interrupters, or really horrible virtual members of society.
all right, in that case, because Matt stepped out, I am also in alignment now. I am somewhat switching to, I think there is something good to be consistent with what town council's doing. So despite planning commission not being, we're better
So I have a
at
question.
following rules. Yes.
If you're out and you attend virtually, does that count as an absence
No,
for attendance record?
no.
So it's ending.
You're still attending, but it sounds like we're in agreement. We are going to, yes, follow suit with town council. You can attend but not participate.
You can't participate in advance.
In
You can- you
advance.
can
Yes, you can submit, and I will, as chair, try to reach out. If anyone plans on being absent, I will absolutely touch base and
That's how we know you read the packet. Put in some good questions in advance.
Mhm.
is that good, Mark? I'm sorry for the
Yeah.
run around. Okay, good. All right. Lorium
Full circle.
circle.
Okay, well, Matt stepped out. And
Oh, he's back.
it's okay, Matt. Just gonna say that he was the only one that missed the site. No, David. Okay, well, what we'd love to get from Bo Saxonet on Lorium is a preferred parking option. If you're comfortable recommending one. Recommending staff, we could take this to council and move forward with final engineering plans and then construction in 2025 and budgeting for the project in 2025. I'm happy to field any questions regarding the details of the site visit, or you guys can just discuss it, but that's where we'd love to land at the end of this discussion.
Could we hear from, Catherine by any chance, just in her?
In what regard?
Maybe.
Just your feeling on what your considerations are for either of these. You had mentioned when we spoke earlier today about some of the options and considerations, regards to dirt donations and equipment, et cetera.
And we went over some of that too
Okay.
when we were on site, but I think, to summarize, I think some of the things we talked about are with the inside the gate location, right? Some challenges there could be the grade of the driveway and how steep that might be getting into that location. And is that a significant improvement for people driving in and out versus the steepness of the road and getting in and out of the existing parking spaces? Potential challenges with plowing that area, right? So our road and bridge team plows the current Larium parking. And in order to plow an option behind the gate, they would need to use a snow plow, which is not the piece of equipment they're taking up there all the time to plow the roads in this subdivision. They use a road grader because a snow plow, unless you put chains on it, doesn't have enough traction to get up the steepness of the roads in this subdivision. So if we wanted to do the behind the gate option, we'd probably be looking at contracting with a private company or paying Road and Bridge to do a special, plowing service in this area versus at all of our other trailhead locations. Road and Bridge plows trailheads as part of their regular plowing routes. And that's not something that Open Space and Trails is currently paying for separately. What else did we talk about? And then as far as the dirt goes, I think with whatever we decide, I think our goal is to look for any cost savings possible in the town and the county, or we're always building something somewhere. And anytime we can, take fill from one project and put it somewhere else, that's a win-win for both projects. So we would certainly seek out fill dirt for this project from any other project we might be able to. Any other things we talked about out there that? And I think it would be helpful, at least from a staff perspective. I know there was a little bit of conversation when we were out there about still possibly pursuing both sides of the road just as a cost saving measure in the dirt moving aspect. I think for mostly we have not been looking at that because we didn't want to expand the existing number of spaces that we had. And then also the sheriff's office had some concern about narrowing the road width, if you have people parked on both sides and then there's snow piles and then people start to park further and further out, and then maybe you're restricting that travel width. But I feel like when we were on site, there was some conversation of like, do we do this all at once, potentially to save expense in moving dirt from one side of the road to the other, and not necessarily open it all up at this time. It's just you're constructing it and reserving it as a future option. And so I don't think that's something we were considering before the site visit. And if that's something that's of interest, I think it would just be good to know that as well. I'm not tied to any of these options, by the way, just want to hear from you guys what you.
A question about what was proposed today about the kind of do both sides still, given the opposition because of the plowing and because of like the shade on the upper side.
Yeah.
How is that even still an option to the other side?
No, I hear what you're saying. I think there are kind of two aspects to that. One is are we creating additional capacity for parking, which I don't think there's a lot of sentiment from either committee or council or VOCC to expand the parking. I think there was some concern about that. So this would be like, maybe someday down the line, we decide that's appropriate. And then I think similarly, I think it would be going back to Road and Bridge and saying, I don't think it was like, heck no, we will never, ever plow that. If you build it, forget it. It was like, our strong preference is really, if the SO says one side of the road is the best way to go, our strong preference is the side we looked at rather than the other side for ease of plowing. So
that's helpful. Thank
I don't think we know for sure, but I think it's reasonable we could go back to them and talk about it.
If we don't have other questions, we could go around and. Are we good there? Questions? Chris, why don't you?
Question.
Oh, yes, please.
Just, is there any setbacks that need to be adhered to from the property line for parking? Is there 15-foot setbacks, or is there anything that we need to be concerned about as far as?
I don't,
I would guess there is, but yeah, I think it's worth looking into. Yeah. I think it's a good point. Yeah. Sorry.
Chris, do you want to start us off?
Let's kick it off again.
Okay.
Thanks again for the site visit today. Looking at the packet, and initially I was always a big advocate for putting a lot kind of on the other side of the gate. And kind of controlling some of that space a little bit more as far as the interaction with the guests and locals that are using it. But just looking at it today, I just don't see how that works. And then talk a little bit about the grade of the driveway even going to it and how that still might be 10%, 12% grade even getting up into the parking lot. That choke point in the funnel getting in the parking lot looks pretty onerous as far as users getting in and out of that. And then the plowing isn't a minor concern either. So I'm in favor of just one side of the road. I don't think we need to address more parking right now. I don't think that's what this whole thing got started about. It's more the safety of the parking. So I'm in favor of the parking lot as shown as the preferred option. I do really want to try to find a solution for kind of reprogramming the trailhead and kind of making that the new trailhead across from the parking area and using that, because I think that actually uplifts the experience a ton if we do that correctly. And since our space and since there's already a trail there that we walked. So that's mine.
Wait, to clarify, Chris, you said parking lot, but did you mean the street?
Yes, the road parking.
Road.
Think.
I agree. I have probably shared all of my thoughts. I think my main concern is just the driveway being steep just doesn't really solve the exact problem that we're trying to solve. We're just creating another hill. Not on parking, but I can imagine a lot of people not being able to get up that, but think they can get up that because they're going a lot slower than they were on the road, and it would just create a choke point. I also just think aesthetically, it's nicer on the road than creating a parking lot inside of that protected area. It is a really special place up there, so I think being able to keep the cars on the road is preferable from an aesthetic perspective as well. Bobby, what do you think?
I started out wanting the one behind the gate because I didn't like the parking on the street, and you got a few more spaces and it looked like it was less expensive. But after going there and listening to the discussion, besides the fact that the driveway is going to be pretty steep and the access narrow, I'm really concerned about the water and the wetlands in there, and we don't really understand the hydraulics of that meadow very well. And I think putting a parking lot on top of that is probably just asking for trouble. So, you know, I'm in favor of the one side.
Okay. Jay?
Thank you, Duke and Tony, for taking so much time to put all these together and to really vet all options that are on the table so that we can make an educated recommendation. I think that was really important to see kind of the other things, the other ways we could go with it. From the beginning, I've been in anything other than going beyond the gates. Keep it the way it is, do it on the road, whatever, but don't go beyond the gates. I think that there's so much in that meadow that is so important. And you know, I feel like every other time you're there, you see the moose there, you see all the wildlife, you see the wetlands and the historic structures. And I just think it is such a magical area from the gate on that I'm really happy to see that this is on the road, even if it is on the west side, is an option. I think when just spitballing at the site of going, hey, what if looking into the future, let me back up. One of the things that we've talked about a lot is doing things twice and the expense of that and the kind of knocking your head against the wall going, why didn't we just do this the first time? And just looking with that lens saying, okay, knowing that perhaps in the future, this trailhead's going to need to be expanded. And knowing that right now, this can be less expensive by using some of that grade on the east side of the road to backfill on the west side. Does it make sense to kind of to set ourselves up for the future? Again, it's spitballing. It's not something that I'm passionate about, but it's just something going, hey, does this make more sense? So that we don't in a couple of years start going, well, now we need to hire dump trucks to come up and take all this fill out so that we can do this other side of the road. That being said, I do think that the trail from the east side of the road makes so much sense. We walked it and it's already made for us. Like we have to like trim two trees and that's about it. And so I am a huge advocate of going above the gates versus beyond the gate, and look forward to seeing that.
Thanks, Jay. Just Matt and David, what we're talking about is Paul Summer suggested just a short section of trail on the east side. Okay, maybe Matt didn't though, that it would just align better with the parking area, that perhaps the trailhead could be moved there right across the road, to then not have people traveling on the actual road. And the alignment is, as Jay was just saying, and Chris, it's essentially there already. So it's an old road grade, so.
I like that.
Okay. Matt, what are you thinking?
I mean, since I wasn't there, I'm gonna hold off on offering opinion. I can kind of see it in my mind, but without seeing it in person, it's hard to really understand.
Okay. David?
I've been up there enough, I think, this summer. I like I like all the comments here. I think the 15 on that side is great, and I really like the idea of that trail.
I'm the same. I don't need to repeat anything other than I am a big fan of that alternative trail alignment and moving the trailhead, potentially how staff would think would be good across from that parking lot. Great. See how quickly we did that one compared to the previous item. Okay, council matters related to open space.
All right, I will keep this quick. We talked about the McCain open space planning that is up to $100,000 placeholder for 2025. We talked about that in our capital improvement planning. The other thing that was in there was $100,000 for $100,000 place marker in 2026 for Pond Park. That would be on track 15, and that would be kind of for planning dollars for a park near the Alta Verde, Vista Verde workforce housing units. This would we're doing the planning and the design work just to go out and get grants. The money wouldn't actually be spent to build the pond park unless we were able to secure about 50% of the construction, which we're looking at about $1 million is maybe 50%. So we'd be looking for $1 million grant. That $100,000 will be split 50-50 with open space and excise fund. And so that will be looking forward to 2026. McCain infrastructure was the third part of the McCain parcel that was involved with the CIP. So it was the McCain open space planning, which we talked about, Pond Park, and then McCain infrastructure. There was $4 million in there for McCain infrastructure. That was pared down to $1 million, which it will be for the rec path, that realignment, most likely go along the new Public Works Road. It will address two kind of dangerous intersections. One that we just created with that Public Works road. Now the bike path crosses that. And then, of course, the other one is at the Fairview roundabout where we've all seen it, and that would address that as well. 50% of that would come out of the open space fund as well. The other big thing that we talked about was the selection process for BOSAC for if we have a vacancy, that staff and a town council liaison will be doing one-on-one meetings with the applicants for a vacant seat and narrow it down to 3 candidates that would then interview with council. So kind of going from one side where, you know, the BOSAC would decide who fills a vacancy, to the other side of the spectrum where council was going to interview everyone that applied. Now we're finding that happy medium where we'll do some one-on-one interviews more or less, and then recommend 3 to council. The last thing I have is we do have a November 18th BOSAC Town Council joint meeting. If you have any topics that you feel like is pressing, please let me, Duke, know, and we'll throw them on the agenda.
Thanks, Jay. Can you speak really quick to council approving Breck History's 2025 CIP?
Yes. So Breck History and Larissa came with their 5-year CIP plan. Council approved year 1, which includes the mini mine. We will yet to see exactly what shape that takes. Will Breck History go and rebuild mini mine like we saw on the presentation from Larry and Larissa? Possibly. Will there be some rendition of that will be very similar, but maybe not as tall or not as, not the exact same thing? That's all to be determined, but Breck History was given the funds to do it, to do all the projects they presented to us, including mini mine. They've been asked to come with an ask for years 2 through 5 for a consistent amount that they can work with for their rehabilitation and stabilization projects that will be consistent amount through the next, those 4 years.
Great. David, did you have a thought on the mini mine moving forward? You had shared keeping apprised of
Okay.
something good I hadn't talked about. It's okay. It's okay. I think we had talked about, you just wanted to stay in touch about how that project was
Oh,
emerging.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I think one of the questions, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I see you tomorrow to work? I think what, one of the questions that I had was, in that process, if BOSAC could remain kind of in the loop as far as the scope goes and what that would look like if they come back, or, you know, can they come back to BOSAC? Can we have conversations about what the trail would look like and, you know, width of the trail, and just kind of have that conversation here would be great, and kick that back up to council as you know, our comments. Obviously they don't have to adhere to them, obviously, but it'd be nice to stay involved with that, because I think it does, it certainly could impact some of the trail experiences out there.
Absolutely.
Just to add a little bit, I went to Breck History Board meeting last Wednesday and they were debriefing on it. And they're definitely looking at ways maybe to scale back a little bit, because the vote was 4-3 at the council, and that never feels great. You know, you love to hear a unanimous vote. So they definitely are looking at ways maybe to scale back. Some of the things that were suggested is if they just move the footprint a couple of feet, they wouldn't have to put this as big of a retaining wall against the hillside, things like that. So they're refining it as we speak.
Great. Thanks, Mark. One thing I wanted to just offer was, after we talked about that project with Larry and Larissa here, I think some of us acquiesced a bit on expressing eagerness and support for the project. I think people had more concerns than felt apparent in the moment, which got me thinking a bit about, for me personally, I felt compelled to want to talk to more people about it. I was going back and forth. So, and I struggled with hearing that a few of us felt that way. And I just wanted to suggest that if people aren't feeling like they have enough information, or they don't want to make a decision right then and there, I think we just need to be good about saying that.
I agree. I think maybe just one question we can put in our little toolbox for our packets is, like, our first question should be, does BOSAC feel like we have enough information to make a decision today? Just to level set, so that I can, because I felt like that too, but I didn't realize I felt like that until
Yeah,
afterwards. And
right.
that's happened a couple of times where I'm like, oh, I guess we're making a decision right now, and I didn't realize there was an opportunity to bring it back next month or something like that. So I think just like a prompting question for us to say, do we feel comfortable, like, with the information we have, do we feel comfortable making a decision today, just for that gut check before we go through the other questions?
Yeah.
Well, as somebody who was one of those people who walked out and then suddenly changed their mind after thinking about it a little more, if I recall correctly, I think what happened was the dialogue became, and I was one of those people, the dialogue was more about just feedback. And I felt like maybe it was really that, because I think Mark had said, this is, you guys don't have to make a decision. I think if I recall, you said it wasn't a decision thing, but we offered feedback, which sort of turned into that, not by anybody's fault. It just sort of happened.
I recall you weighed in on making a financial commitment,
Okay.
but yeah, I think you're right. It did become more of a feedback.
But I think even just hearing like council being like, I can still give financial commitment and agree to continue working on the design is nice to know, because that didn't cross my mind, that was an option.
Yeah. But when you think about it being a 4-3 vote, I just wonder if we had thought about it longer and maybe arrived at a different conclusion, how their vote might have gone.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
but I think we're all, yeah, it's great. Council's making adjustments, or I'm sorry, Breck History's making adjustments potentially, so. But I just, if anyone, yeah, I wanted to share that. Yeah. Okay, anyone have any other matters that aren't on the agenda? I know we're running a bit late here, but
We have executive session.
we do. No? Okay. All right, so I think it's exec session time. Okay, are we good for me to read my thing?
We record this process.
Just love that you have a
And then
Just made it. Yeah, it needs to be updated, but this will work for now.
Nope. it's
We
been
okay?
edited.
yeah, we're just gonna record this and then once we enter, pause.
Okay, great. I move that BOSAC go into executive session under CRS 24-64024E for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategies for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators concerning a property that the town may be interested in acquiring for open space purposes. I'll list who's here: Julia Puster, Turk Bonapar, Catherine King, Alex Stack, Mark Truckee, Jay Beckerman, Chris Settle, myself, Nikki LaRochelle, David Rossi. Oh, Bobby, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You were hidden behind Chris. Bobby Zanka, David Rossi, Kristen Joyce, Matt Powers, Tony Overlock, Duke Barlow. Oh, I need a second on that. Okay, great.
Here.
It is September 16th, 2024, and the time is 7:52 PM. For the record, I am the presiding officer, Nikki LaRochelle, as required by open meetings law. This executive session is being electronically recorded. Also present at this executive session are the following persons. If I did that prematurely, do I need to name them again?
Alex, is that thing on?
Got this.
Don't you have to click yes?